shops have been working together. Alex been involved also with that in terms of sharing data. Where to start on that conversation? I know we've been doing a lot with the technology Snowflake, which is a cloud-based tool that will automate the data sharing.
When we talk about global finance, most people immediately think about the IMF, the World Bank, or SWIFT as the backbone of international transactions. But sitting quietly above all these institutions is the Bank for International Settlements, BIS, often referred to as the central bank of central banks. The BIS is where the big decisions about monetary coordination are made, decisions that often never make front-page news, but ripple through every economy on the planet. And in recent years, the BIS has been experimenting with something that could redefine money itself, Project Mariana. Now, on paper, Project Mariana looks like a fairly technical pilot program. The official BIS line is that it is exploring how automated market makers, AMMs, and decentralized finance, DeFi liquidity pools could be used for cross-border foreign exchange swaps. That means they are testing whether they can use blockchain-like infrastructure to allow central banks to swap currencies instantly, cheaply, and without friction. The pilot specifically looked at tokenized versions of the euro, Singapore dollar, and Swiss franc. But here's where the speculation begins. Although no official mention was made of Stellar or Ripple, the design of Mariana almost perfectly mirrors the systems these two projects have been building for over a decade. This overlap has fueled widespread rumors that behind closed doors, the BIS may be quietly leaning on Ripple and Stellar technologies as test rails for a future global digital money system. Let's take a step back. Ripple, XRP, has positioned itself from the very beginning as a wholesale settlement token, targeting banks, payment providers, and financial institutions. Its on-demand liquidity, ODL product already functions much like an automated market maker, sourcing liquidity from global markets, and using XRP as the bridge asset to move value between otherwise illiquid currency pairs. Sound familiar? That's essentially the same problem the BIS is trying to solve with Mariana. On the other side, we have Stellar XLM, which has carved out a very different but complementary niche. Rather than focusing on wholesale banking, Stellar has been all about financial inclusion, retail payments, and humanitarian aid distribution. From its partnerships with the UNHCR to MoneyGram's integration with Stellar Rails for USDC, Stellar has proven itself as the perfect retail-facing bridge between traditional money and tokenized assets. Now, if Ripple is about interbank liquidity, Stellar is about grassroots payments, but together, the two form a full-stack infrastructure for both wholesale and retail cross-border settlement. This is where the rumors heat up. Some analysts speculate that the BIS could be orchestrating a dual-rail model. Ripple for the high-level, institutional settlement layer and Stellar for the retail and CBDC distribution layer. When you put it in that light, Project Mariana looks less like a random DeFi experiment and more like a test run of what Ripple and Stellar have already spent years perfecting. Adding fuel to the fire is the fact that the BIS rarely experiments in isolation. Every pilot they run, from Project Helvetia to Project Dunbar, ties back to broader strategic goals of central bank digital currency, CBDC, development. And the IMF has already spoken openly about the need for a platform for cross-border CBDCs, a single system where multiple national CBDCs can interact. Who else has been building the exact architecture for this? Ripple and Stellar. Skeptics will point out that there's no official confirmation, no document that explicitly says BIS is using XRP or XLM. That's true. But consider how secretive these pilots are. Even Swift's blockchain-based CBDC interoperability experiments only became public years after the initial trials. And when institutions as conservative as the BIS start borrowing language from the DeFi world, liquidity pools, AMMs, tokenized deposits, it's hard to believe they're reinventing the wheel from scratch. The most likely scenario is that they're leveraging existing technology and simply not disclosing which rails they're testing. Another layer of intrigue comes from the personal history of Ripple and Stellar. Jed McCaleb, one of the co-founders of Ripple, later broke away to form Stellar. The two networks share the same DNA but have evolved with different mandates. Some in the crypto community argue that this split was never about competition but about creating two complementary systems, one designed for banks and one designed for the masses. If that's true, then the BIS could be strategically positioning itself to harness both sides of this equation without appearing to favor one token over another. Think about it. A world where Ripple is the bridge asset for interbank settlements while Stellar becomes the distribution rail for CBDCs to everyday users. That's not just plausible. It's a direct echo of the BIS's vision for multi-tier money. And with Project Mariana showing that they are ready to adopt DeFi mechanics into official monetary structures, the timeline for this integration may be closer than many think. So while mainstream media reports Project Mariana as just another technical experiment, crypto insiders see it as a thinly veiled signal. Ripple and Stellar may not be named on the press release, but their fingerprints are all over the architecture being tested. And if that's true, then XRP and XLM aren't just speculative assets anymore. They could be the hidden backbone of the next evolution of global finance. The framework of Project Mariana and why Ripple and Stellar might already be playing behind the scenes. Then the next piece of the puzzle is understanding how Ripple, in particular, has embedded itself into the world of traditional finance. The reason many analysts see Ripple as a prime candidate for BIS alignment is simple. It has spent over a decade building relationships not with retail traders, but with the banking elite. Ripple's on-demand liquidity, ODL, solution has already been adopted by banks, remittance services, and payment corridors in regions like Asia-Pacific, the Middle East, and Latin America. These are not small, speculative partnerships. They include institutions such as Santander, SBI Holdings in Japan, Tranglo in Southeast Asia, and even central banks testing Ripple's CBDC platform. What Ripple has done better than almost any other blockchain project is the slow, meticulous work of regulatory integration. Rather than trying to fight governments, it has positioned itself as a bridge between traditional finance and digital assets. That bridge is exactly what Project Mariana is about. The BIS is not looking for a radical break with the old system. It's looking for a seamless upgrade, a way for central banks to experiment with tokenized money without threatening their existing authority. Ripple has designed XRP and ODL to serve this purpose. It's a neutral bridge asset that can move value without replacing fiat. In other words, Ripple offers the BIS a way to modernize money while keeping central banks in control. Skeptics sometimes point to Ripple's ongoing legal battles in the US as a barrier. But in reality, these may have been less of a weakness and more of a vetting process. If Ripple survives regulatory scrutiny in the United States, the toughest market in the world for crypto compliance, then its legitimacy only increases in the eyes of institutions like the BIS and IMF. And it's telling that while the US case dragged on, Ripple continued to expand aggressively overseas, embedding itself in corridors that the BIS itself has targeted as key regions for CBDC development. Another reason Ripple is constantly linked with these global projects is its technical design. Unlike proof-of-work chains that require enormous energy resources, Ripple runs on a consensus protocol that is lightweight and scalable. This aligns with the BIS's emphasis on sustainability and efficiency. When you read BIS reports on CBDCs, they often stress the need for low-cost, energy-efficient settlement systems. Ripple fits that criteria almost perfectly. So the whispers about Ripple's involvement with Project Mariana don't come out of nowhere. They are built on a decade of Ripple playing the long game, cultivating banks, aligning with regulators, and building tech that can plug directly into global payment rails. Even if BIS never publicly announces, "We used XRP," the circumstantial evidence points to Ripple's fingerprints being on the infrastructure. And if XRP is indeed acting as a silent test asset in these pilots, it could mean the token is positioned to become the backbone of interbank liquidity in the digital age. While Ripple often takes the spotlight because of its direct ties to banks and regulators, Stellar has been quietly playing an equally strategic game, but on the other side of the equation. If Ripple is building the rails for institutions, Stellar is embedding itself where financial infrastructure meets the real economy, especially through NGOs, humanitarian aid, and financial inclusion programs. This dual strategy is why many analysts argue Ripple and Stellar are not competitors in the BIS landscape, but complementary pieces of the same puzzle. Stellar's nonprofit foundation, the Stellar Development Foundation, SDF, has positioned the network as the blockchain for cross-border remittances, aid delivery, and microfinance. The BIS has repeatedly emphasized that CBDCs and tokenized money are not just about efficiency for banks. They're also about reaching the billions of people who are currently underserved by the financial system. Stellar speaks directly to that vision. Take the case of Stellar's work with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR. Through a pilot project, Stellar has facilitated digital cash assistance directly to displaced families using USDC on Stellar. Instead of waiting days for banks or aid organizations to distribute funds, recipients can access money instantly through a mobile wallet. That's not just innovation, it's proof of concept for the very retail layer of CBDCs that BIS research often points toward. If Ripple is helping central banks move trillions, Stellar is showing how to move hundreds of dollars efficiently to those who need it most. Both layers matter. Another critical piece is Stellar's focus on stablecoins. The BIS is obsessed with how stablecoins could integrate into future CBDC systems. Stellar has become one of the leading blockchains for stablecoin issuance and transfer, with Circle's USDC and other regional digital currencies using its network. This makes Stellar an ideal testbed for stablecoin interoperability, which the BIS sees as a key step before CBDCs can go global. And then there's Stellar's strategic alignment with major players like MoneyGram International. Their partnership has already created one of the largest crypto-to-cash and cash-to-crypto networks in the world. This physical on- and off-ramp infrastructure solves a problem Ripple hasn't addressed as deeply: how ordinary people, especially in emerging markets, can bridge between fiat and digital assets seamlessly. For BIS and central banks, this infrastructure is invaluable, because any CBDC experiment will fail if people cannot actually access or use the new digital money. Stellar's design also mirrors many of the policy priorities BIS highlights. It's energy efficient, fast, and low cost. It isn't trying to reinvent money, but to make existing money more functional across borders. And because Stellar is structured as a nonprofit with a mission-driven foundation, it projects a public interest narrative that resonates strongly with the humanitarian language often used in BIS and IMF publications. Put together, these moves suggest that Stellar is not just a side player. It's quietly becoming the retail and humanitarian complement to Ripple's institutional infrastructure. In other words, if Ripple is the banker's blockchain, Stellar is the people's blockchain, and BIS may need both to make its long-term CBDC vision work. When you step back and really look at it, the most fascinating possibility isn't Ripple or Stellar thriving on their own. It's the way the two could converge under the bigger umbrella of BIS's global CBDC architecture. Think about it. BIS isn't trying to crown one winner. What they want is interoperability. They want different payment systems to talk to each other seamlessly across borders, across asset classes, and even across regulatory regimes. And who do we see already moving in that direction? Ripple and Stellar. On Ripple's side, you have the institutional-grade corridors, connecting central banks, commercial banks, and market makers. On Stellar's side, you have the grassroots rails, connecting wallets, NGOs, remittance firms, and end users. If those two layers remain siloed, BIS will still face gaps. But if they somehow align, even indirectly, you'd suddenly have a complete stack, from the highest levels of monetary policy down to the individual trying to send $50 home. We've already seen hints of this alignment. Both Ripple and Stellar have strong ties with stablecoin issuers like Circle and with payment giants like Visa and MoneyGram. In BIS reports, stablecoins are often described as a bridge asset that could make CBDCs usable in the real world. Ripple provides the liquidity layer. Stellar provides the distribution layer. And when those overlap, for example, in remittance corridors where banks settle wholesale transfers on Ripple but users cash out through Stellar-linked networks, you start to see the outline of an interoperable CBDC future. Another clue lies in the shared regulatory language. Ripple has leaned heavily into compliance, building tools that align with FATF guidelines, anti-money laundering standards, and institutional custody norms. Stellar, while mission-driven, has done the same, just at the retail end, ensuring wallets and on-ramps meet KYC standards. This dual approach matches BIS's insistence that any future system must balance inclusion with compliance. It's almost as if Ripple and Stellar are working on opposite halves of the same assignment, without directly saying they're collaborating. Then there's the technical angle. Ripple's XRP ledger and Stellar's network share a lot of DNA. Remember, Jed McCaleb, one of Ripple's original co-founders, went on to create Stellar. Their consensus mechanisms are different now, but the philosophical core, fast, cheap, borderless transfers, is the same. That makes the idea of interoperability between them more realistic than with blockchains designed for completely different purposes. The long-term BIS play could very well be a hybrid model. Ripple serving as the wholesale settlement backbone for central banks and financial institutions, while Stellar provides the retail distribution rails for NGOs, fintechs, and individual users. Together, they'd form a layered system that reflects the real-world economy. Money moving at the top in trillions, and money moving at the bottom in hundreds, all part of the same digital ecosystem. So the question isn't which one wins anymore. The real question is, when BIS finally unveils its global CBDC blueprint, will Ripple and Stellar already be positioned as the two halves of a single solution? If that happens, it won't just validate both projects. It could permanently embed them in the architecture of global finance. So, let's bring this full circle. The rumors about the BIS looking at Ripple and Stellar aren't really about secret deals or hidden alliances. They're about recognizing patterns. Ripple is shaping the institutional backbone of a new financial system, while Stellar is handling the human-facing layer. Put the two together, and you start to see exactly what the BIS has been hinting at for years. A truly global, interoperable digital money ecosystem. Think about it. Central banks need Ripple to move billions across borders in seconds without relying on outdated correspondent banking. But those same central banks need Stellar when it comes to distributing aid, supporting micropayments, or building remittance corridors where everyday people interact with this new form of money. Without both sides, the system doesn't work. That's why it's not a competition. It's a convergence. And honestly, that's what makes this moment so exciting. If the BIS does formalize Ripple and Stellar into its framework, we're not just talking about price pumps or hype cycles. We're talking about these networks being hardwired into the global financial system. That's the kind of adoption that can't be undone. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Ripple and Stellar will actually converge in the BIS framework? Or do you see them taking separate lanes in the global CBDC rollout? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this debate is only heating up. And hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown and you want more deep dives into Ripple, Stellar, and the future of digital money, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. The future of finance is unfolding in real time, and we're going to track every move together.